On John 25-26, 2026, South Korea's President Lee Jae-myung moved to withdraw the appointment of Lee Jae-hoon, who had been tapped as a budget minister nominee, after controversy and allegations escalated in the media and politics. The withdrawal is being framed domestically as a test of the administration's vetting standards and its willingness to correct course quickly when credibility questions surface. In practical terms, this matters for foreigners because budget leadership influences the pace of economic policy, public spending priorities, and the tone of market confidence. Especially in a year when households and small businesses are watching inflation, jobs, and housing costs closely, the opposition is pushing the narrative that the appointment process was sloppy, while government allies argue the decision shows accountability rather than weakness. Watch what happens next. Whether the president nominates a replacement fast, whether any formal investigations follow, and whether the episode becomes a bigger talking point about governance competence. South Korea's president reiterated that a temporary tax break for multi-homeowners, which waives an additional capital gains tax surcharge when selling, will end on May 9, 2026. That deadline matters because it can change behavior before the cutoff. Some owners may rush to sell to lock in lower tax, while others may hold and wait, depending on expectations for prices and enforcement. For foreigners living in Korea, this is relevant even if you don't own multiple homes, because listing volume and transaction timing can influence rents, jobs dynamics, and neighborhood price sentiment. The government's message is also political. It's signaling that the housing market should not be driven by tax gaming, while acknowledging it can't fully control market forces. In the coming weeks, watch for three things: changes in Seoul apartment listings, real estate industry lobbying for extensions, and whether policymakers introduce targeted relief for edge cases, like contract timing, without reopening the entire exemption. A strong winter cold snap has continued into late January, with the National Weather Agency and broadcasters warning that much of the country remains under cold wave advisories and sub-freezing daytime temperatures in key regions. The big risk is not just discomfort, it's black ice, longer commutes, and a spike in slips, falls, and minor traffic collisions when roads refreeze overnight. If you're new to Korea's winter, treat official advisories as a plan change signal. Leave earlier, choose flatter walking routes, and assume sidewalks can be slick even after snow is gone. For drivers, the practical checklist is simple. Reduce speed early, increase following distance, and avoid sudden braking, especially on bridges and shaded roads. For travelers, keep an eye on transport alerts and pack for wind chill, because temperatures can feel much colder than the number on your phone suggests. The best source is still the official alert language and KBS KMA updates, because those tell you whether the country is in advisory versus warning mode and which provinces are most affected. In the early hours of John 26, a wildfire broke out on Mount Surak, Suraksan, in northern Seoul, triggering emergency response and public safety messaging. Reports said the fire started near a temple area and spread across the mountain terrain, where steep slopes and wind can complicate containment. While these events are often brought under control quickly, they matter because smoke and small embers can affect nearby neighborhoods, and access roads or hiking trails may be restricted without much notice. If you live in Nowon-gu or nearby districts, the practical guidance is: follow local text alerts, avoid the mountain area until authorities reopen it, and don't assume you can just hike around it for photos. Korea enforces closures tightly during active incidents. For travelers, this is also a reminder that Seoul's hiking culture is huge, even in winter. Before any hike, especially on popular peaks, check city announcements and trail status. The key story today is the speed of the response and how fast officials can prevent flare-ups after the main flames are suppressed. Seoul's counseling center for migrant women moved to a new location in Jongno-gu, with the city emphasizing better accessibility and stronger links to emergency protection services. For foreign residents, especially families, this kind of practical update matters more than political headlines. It affects where you go for help with domestic violence support, counseling, interpretation, and referral services. The city's notice lists the news site inside the Seoul Global Center building in Jongno, which is more central and transit-friendly than many people expect. If you're sharing this with friends, the most useful takeaway is simple. Save the updated location and phone contact now, because in real life, emergencies are not the moment you want to search. Also note that moves like this can briefly disrupt walk-in routines, even if phone lines remain active. So, if you plan a visit, call ahead and confirm hours. For the broader expat community, this is a reminder. Korea has many specialized public support services, but the hardest part is often knowing where they are and how to access them. A political fight is growing over whether online platforms in Korea should be required to display a commenter's nationality and potentially location indicators in certain contexts. Supporters argue it's a transparency and security measure, especially amid fears of coordinated manipulation and cross-border influence. Critics warn it could become a tool for stigmatizing foreigners, chilling speech, or exposing users to harassment. For expats, the key is not who's right in abstract. It's what would change in your daily life, how you comment on news, how you join local community debates, and whether online spaces become less welcoming for non-Koreans. The debate is also tied to electoral politics, meaning it could intensify quickly as campaigns heat up. If this proposal moves forward, watch for details like scope, news comments versus all platforms, whether nationality would be self-declared or verified, and what penalties apply to platforms. Until then, take this as a reminder. In Korea, digital policy can shift fast, and public pressure often drives the timeline. South Korea's former Prime Minister Lee Jae-myung has died while in Vietnam, prompting national-level reactions and renewed discussion of his long political career. For many Koreans, Lee was not just a past official, he was a recognizable figure across decades of party politics, reform debates, and leadership struggles. When a high-profile political elder passes, it often triggers two things at once: formal state and party condolences, and a rapid re-evaluation of their legacy by rival camps. For foreign viewers, the practical question is, why does this matter now? Because it can briefly reshape the internal balance of factions, influence how current leaders frame their own legitimacy, and dominate the news cycle in a way that sidelines other policy stories. It may also affect memorial events and security color traffic planning in Seoul if large funeral gatherings occur. Over the next day or two, watch for official funeral arrangements, statements from current leadership, and whether his passing becomes a broader conversation about the direction of Korean politics and generational transition. North Korean state media reported that Kim Jong-un visited the Mansudae art studio to guide the creation of sculptures for a memorial museum of combat feats at the overseas military operations. International coverage is focusing on what that phrase implies. It appears to formalize and glorify North Korean personnel involved in operations beyond its borders, an especially sensitive point amid allegations and reporting about North Korean troops linked to the Russia-Ukraine war. The story matters because it's not just art, it's messaging. A memorial museum frames deaths as honorable sacrifice, signals institutional pride, and can prepare the public for continued involvement or future deployments. For foreign residents in Korea, the relevance is regional security. Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo watch these symbolic moves for clues about North Korea's confidence and its external alignments. The key open questions are how far Pyongyang will go in public acknowledgement, what this means for sanctions and diplomacy, and whether the messaging escalates military rhetoric on the peninsula. Even without new missile launches, symbolic state media campaigns can shift perceptions and policy tone quickly. The Coupang data breach story is expanding beyond cybersecurity into diplomacy and trade-style pressure. Two major U.S. investors, Green Oaks and Altimeter, have pushed the U.S. government to scrutinize how Korean authorities handled the incident, arguing Korea's response went beyond normal enforcement after a breach that affected roughly 33 million customers. Korean officials reject the claim of discrimination, saying enforcement reflects the breach's scale and legal obligations. Why does this matter for foreigners? Because Coupang is a core piece of daily life. Deliveries, payments, personal information. And also because a public fight between investors and regulators can shape how aggressively Korea enforces data protection rules across the entire tech sector. The story also has a bigger-than-Coupang angle. Investors are signaling they'll use trade and arbitration channels when they believe regulators overreach. In the next few days, watch for three updates: whether U.S. agencies treat this as a trade issue, how Korea's justice and trade ministries respond, and what Kupang says about remediation and security upgrades. Today's biggest entertainment headline out of Korea is simple. BTS is back on the road. Their new world tour, titled BTS World Tour Arirang, is positioned as their first major tour since the group paused full group activities for mandatory military service. And then the opening run is scheduled in Goyang starting April 9th, 2026, with additional dates across the same opening weekend. For fans living in or traveling to Korea, this matters because the first shows usually drive the biggest demand for flights, hotels, and local transport. Ticketing and official schedules are being handled through the group's official channels and Korea's major ticket platform, which also posts venue and date information. Internationally, the tour is being described as a stadium-scale comeback, with dozens of shows across Asia, the US, and Europe. Media coverage highlights how intense the ticket scramble has been. Some fans even travel to Korea hoping faster connections improve their chances during sales windows. For foreign visitors planning around it, the practical advice is straightforward. Follow official notices for ticket rules, identity checks, and entry timing. Avoid unofficial resellers, and plan the Goyang area commute like a major sports event day. The core story is not just hype. It's Korea's biggest pop export restarting the live machine, and that tends to ripple into tourism, retail, and the broader K-culture economy conversation.
Quick K, your fast track to Korea news.